but I'm going to keep mine here. What I'm going to do now is I am going to outline around my pineapple with my marker of choice. And then I'll fill in the whole background with this color. Now, if your watercolor got outside of your lines, or you're worried about your marker getting dirty from the watercolor or just things getting all mixed, you can wait for your painting to dry. If you're watching this video, that means you've got the time to just wait for your paint to do what it needs to do. So we're outlining, we're going around. You could also choose to do your background in watercolor if you so desire, but I really like the look of the background being done in the marker. I think it's really, really vibrant. Again, it's your choice. It's up to you in that respect. This part might take a minute. It's a huge area that we're going to color in, so just take your time and pace yourself. If you accidentally get marker on the table, not to worry. It will come off. Now, because I'm left-handed, I'm actually going to move this off to the side. It's kind of in my way, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. Still doing my long strokes, trying to keep them as neat as possible. When you're doing marker projects or you're filling in a large space with marker, it's super important that you try and keep things as neat as possible, as well as trying to do your strokes in the same direction. It'll look more pleasing to the eye that way. Now, depending on what you've added, maybe you decided to add something extra into your background. The more details you add in general will mean that you take more time. So don't worry if you're not done by the time that I'm moving on from a part of my background. You keep going at your pace. You can see sometimes I miss a stroke, I just go back and fill it in. Not to worry, not a big deal. You're not really going to see it anyway. All right, almost there and done. All right, so there is that part of the background. I want this to be a sandy color, but my Brown Mister sketch marker is a little bit too dark. So I actually have a set of Crayola markers that we use for warm-ups. I'm going to break into this one, but if you in your marker set have a nice sand color like a tan, use that. That would be my recommendation to you. For me, this is kind of like a peachy color, which sand can be this color as well. So that's why I am using it. To make it more comfortable for myself to do these outlines here, because they're kind of close to me and towards the bottom, I have turned my paper. I am actually going to turn it again so I can do proper horizontal strokes on the bottom. Again, that's just so that I can do the strokes proper. Might be kind of hard to do if I'm like all the way down here, scrunching my arm against myself. Might have to move that as well. Again, just try your best. If you have a different idea for what you wanted to do in this sandy area, go for it. Again, you probably have other things that you wanted to add that I didn't. Just continue to work on them. All right, I really like this sandy texture that I've created, and I'll probably go back and add more texture with it with watercolor later by doing a sort of sprinkling effect. But this will do for now. All right, so now once you've finished that part of your background and maybe you worked on some little details like Spongebob or Gary or anything else that you've added, I want you to check on your pineapple, kind of feel around it. Is it dry? Is it wet still? If the answer is it's wet still, I want you to wait until it's completely dry for this next part, because we're going to be using markers on top of the watercolor we just did. So what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and break out a red marker. This is going to be for drawing in the lines of the pineapple that we see in the cartoon for SpongeBob. Now, what you're going to do, take your red. You are going to draw diagonal lines. Try and space them out as evenly as possible, all across the pineapple. If you can, try and curve them a little bit as well. That will make the pineapple look a little bit more rounded. There we go. So that's one direction. Now we got to go the opposite way. So go ahead and draw those diagonals going the opposite direction. Again, try and curve them just a little bit. All right, there we go. Now, same marker. Take your marker and add little dots to the center. These are kind of like where the little spikes are on the pineapple when you pick it up. So anywhere where you can place them, just put a little spot. There, it's already starting to look more like the pineapple from the show, right? All right, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna still take this red and we're gonna add a little bit of shading using the marker. Now, to do this, it's gonna seem a little bit tricky at first, but trust me on this. I want you to go towards the bottom of the pineapple here, and I want you just to make a stroke. Kind of like this. You can make it thicker or smaller. You can see it also doesn't touch the edge of the door or the sides of the pineapple. I want you to do the same thing onto the other side. It's kind of making this thick stroke. It's not touching really the sides of the pineapple. It's just kind of in the middle. Taking your marker again, you're now going to draw very gently this curved line all the way down and up. This is going to add some shading for the pineapple itself. Now it's pretty harsh right now, which is okay. You can take a different color red, a lighter red, or even an orange. And what you can do is you can do those hatching lines that we learned about from earlier in the week, or from our earlier Batman project. And you can do those next to that red line that we just made. And this is going to add some shading and even more texture to the pineapple itself. You can even go right underneath the leaves if you want to. You can add a little bit of this color onto the other side. Just remember to be careful because your paper may not look it, but it might secretly still be wet underneath. So just be gentle. Really bring that out if you need to. You can also do some shading onto the bottom of the chimney, or even underneath the windows. That's a little extra, but you can choose if you want to do that or not. Furthermore, you could even do it onto the sides of the door. Okay? All right, so that's the main body of the pineapple. Let's do the windows next. Now for this, you're actually going to need a purple. It looks like my purple's escaped me there, but not to worry. I do have those Crayola markers I mentioned from before. This might work well because usually the Crayola markers have a very strong tip to them. They're very small. So go ahead and grab a purple or even a dark blue, and we are going to go ahead and add some shading to the sides here. So using this color, you are going to fill in those crescent moon shapes from before. Same thing on the window over here. And then on the windows, I want you underneath each of those little circles I want you to add a little teeny tiny shadow. Might be hard to tell on the camera, but go underneath your circles with that purple or blue. Just add a little teeny tiny shadow. Next, I want you to go to the part where it would be the mirror of the window, or like the window part, and you're just going to draw some diagonal lines to kind of show the shine or the glass that's there. If you want to add further texture, you can take your marker and again add some hatching lines onto the rim of the window, but that's up to you. Now let's go ahead and do the door. For the door, we are going to add a shadow along this inner part of the door's border. You can make it thicker towards the bottom if you'd like. You can even add a little bit of that purple or blue onto the outside of the door, right about here. Then go to the wheel of the door, and on the inside of that circle, the inner one, you can add just an outline of purple. Then on this outer circle, just on one side, add a little crescent of purple. On each of those little rainbows, those handles, you can add a line of shadow wherever you like. And the same thing we did for the windows, you can go underneath each door and you can add, or under each circle, and add a little shadow along the door. As well, you can add any hatching lines that you want, just to give it a little texture. Last but not least, the chimney. Now for the chimney, same kind of deal as we were talking on the pineapple. Go towards the bottom and make a little line. It does not have to touch the edges. Then what you can do is you can add sort of like a mini shape of the chimney here. All right, so after you kind of have this shape made here, you can fill in parts of it. You actually don't have to fill in the whole thing because it will make it look more reflective, like it's made out of metal. So you can see I just made a bunch of really random shapes and colored around them on the inside. Then go to the top, add a line for the shadow, and maybe you can add a little line towards the bottom to sort of show the curve of the shining metal itself. You can also feel free to add more hatching lines for texture. Okay, so that's the metal part of it. Let's go ahead and work on the leaves, which I think are really fun to do. Now for this, you can use really any kind of green. You could use a dark green Mr. Sketch marker. You could use a green Crayola marker. You can kind of decide which one is going to be best for you. Now I'm going to do this with the dark green Mr. Sketch marker so that you can see what it looks like. But on my original one, which is right here, I actually used this green Crayola instead of the Mr. Sketch. So it's up to you. I'll show you what both of them look like. You already seen the Crayola, so I'll show you the Mr. Sketch marker. So what you're going to do with your green marker for this part is you're going to outline all of the leaves. Try and keep your outline on the inside of the leaf as well. Might take you a second. It might mean that you really have to concentrate. Just try your best. And it get really tricky as you get towards these very thin ones as well. But just keep going. All right, so go ahead and head on over to this one, outline, and we're good to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add some blocks of shading, kind of like what we did for the pineapple and the chimney, and then we're going to do some more hatching and hatch work for the shading. So For this main leaf here, this is actually a pretty good leaf. We don't have to do much else with it, but these leaves that are behind, I want you to go to this leaf here and draw a U shape. Fill in that little triangular part at the bottom. Go on over to this leaf. Draw a U shape. Fill in that little triangular part at the bottom. Now I want you to go to the next leaf over here. Draw a long U shape. Fill in. Same thing, other side. Long U shape and fill in. Okay, these leaves on the bottom, these ones are a little trickier. You're going to draw a diagonal line, then fill in. Diagonal line, then fill in. Now let's do some hatching. So let's do the bottom leaves first because they're pretty straightforward. Take your marker using the tip, do hatch lines going in that diagonal direction. When you go to this side, do diagonal lines in this direction. Those lines can be thick, thin, whatever you like. Next, we're going to go ahead to these two leaves right here. These ones we don't have to do too much because they are facing, they're just closer to us. So maybe just do a couple of little lines. Definitely for these leaves in the back, remember these were the ones that were far behind our leaves from before. You're going to take your marker and you are again going to do a bunch of hatching lines on all of that leaf. Then to the middle leaf, kind of the star of the show, right? If you want, you can draw a line to show the center of the leaf. And then maybe on one side you add lots of hatching lines, and then you spread them out. And maybe on the other, you maybe put more towards the bottom, and you kind of stop, and you don't put any towards the top. There you have it. You have these really textured pineapple leaf shapes. Alrighty, so now that we've got all of that taken care of, let's go ahead and focus back to our background. Now, in the show and in a lot of Spongebob, there are these really cool sort of see-through outlines of flower shapes. So you can take some colorful markers. I'm probably going to start with a pink, like a dark pink. And you can just make these curly flower shapes all along the bottom part of his pineapple home. You can stick to one color, you can mix it up. I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to get a blue in here, do a blue flower on both sides. You could grab an orange marker as well. You can add as many or as few as you like. You can even spread them out. If you also want to add them into the background, kind of like the clouds, clouds that they have in the sky for SpongeBob with the ocean, you could do that too. That would look pretty cool. Okay. Now we're all done with our markers, but we're actually going to bring back the watercolor now for one final thing, which I think you're going to have a lot of fun with. So I'm going to bring back my palette and we're going to add these speckles. Now to do this, you're going to probably need a brush about this big or larger. And you're going to load it up with water first, wipe off any extra, and we're going to do the speckles on the pineapple. So for this, I want you to pick either maybe a dark orange, a red, or a dark red. You're going to go ahead and get your brush full of that color, and your one finger is going to get kind of dirty, so be prepared for that. Make sure your brush is not dripping with paint. You don't want it to be dripping wet. You just want to make sure that it's holding the paint well. So have the brush in one hand, hold this tight, one finger. You are going to go really fast and kind of stroke this up and down to create sprinkles onto the pineapple. Now, it might be kind of hard to see here, given that my camera is not really picking it up, but I'll hold it a little closer to you. You can see there's this little texture on the pineapple there. That's red. You can do this with multiple colors. You could do this with an orange. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and pick up an orange. Again, I don't want it dripping wet, but I do want it full of that orange paint. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of brush the, kind of speckle on this color here. Here we go. All right, you can kind of see it a little better now. They look like little pixels. Now let's do the background. Now you could add in a light orange, you could do a light green, you could do a blue, might turn a little bit green depending on what color you did. I did yellow, but you can do this technique onto the background to give it texture. You can also do this over top your pineapple leaves. So that would be in a green. Of course, we need to do some texture for the sand down here. This would be perfect for that. So I'm going to go ahead and take some brown. Still holding the brush tight. I'm going to add speckles onto the ground to make sand. And we're done. That's it. That's the last coloring step. Definitely after this, get a paper towel or go wash your hands because one of your fingers, or maybe all of them, are going to be covered in watercolor at this point. So go ahead and do that because you have finished all of the steps. So that was our last project for Cartoon Camp. I hope you had a lot of fun. Remember to share your pictures that you make on our Febo Village Facebook page, and I hope to see you guys in the future. Bye for now.